We're going to get started in just
Oh my
1 to
goodness.
2 minutes.
Yeah. I'm happy to wait.
We might get started in 5 minutes to allow the coffee
Sweet.
queue.
Yeah. It's at this end of the day, coffee is necessary. That's how it works, right? You use the coffee and then alcohol at the other end of the day, and it smooths it all out, and water in the middle. I'm already on the water.
Is there an RFC in that area?
There should be. Now, April 1st is when this happens, which means you've got a couple of weeks. So get on it.
There's an April 1st one about coffee.
I'm sure there is, yeah. I had promised myself I was going to get an April 1st RFC out this year, and I have not done any work towards it. So I think it'll be ready by Christmas one year or another. But
Do they know about April 1st RFC?
have you put your finger in the thing to get in the queue?
So where do you want me to put my finger?
Ombuds team.
You'll get a little tidbit of
this is
of
Barry.
extra information not in the presentations today.
The bit about the April 1st RFCs is this long tradition that started roundabouts with the IP over avian carrier, which is carrier pigeons carrying internet packets. And it was released on April 1st of like 1980 something. But what's now distinctive is that every RFC says the month and year that it was published. So an RFC that was legitimately published in April says April 2025. But the April 1st ones will say April 1st, 2025, and that's how you tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just whimsical things that people send off to the RFC editor, well, actually the independent stream editor to publish. So some of them are funny and some of them are trying to be funny. But anyway.
And the IP over avian carrier probably actually works if you have enough birds.
I think someone actually
At scale, it probably does. You can smuggle IP over just about anything, and people do. All right. So I think we got a kind of a let's get started soonish. I understand coffee is a higher priority than anything else, but that's all good. Welcome back, everybody. So I've been asked to do the second section. I believe clicker works. There you go. Here we are in the agenda. There were a couple of questions in the last session which were pretty much anticipating what's going to happen, because obviously these are the things you're here for. People are here for the standards development process, here to understand how it works. I've been asked to speak some more about the tools that you'll use to participate in the session. There's a QR code outside. There isn't a QR code in this room for some reason. But you should be able to.
If you go backwards one slide.
Hey, there you go.
There's also one on the microphone. So as we mentioned in the first session, if you could go ahead and scan that QR code, it'll record your attendance for this session. Again, that helps us keep track of who was in each session, planning purposes. So we're helping you practice because you're going to have to do it at every working group session.
Yeah, and you really actually do have to do it according to the rules that you all agreed to and that Jay flashed up in front of you and spent some time explaining. Throughout the rest of the week, people will flash these rules up in front of you and not spend much time explaining. They'll probably make a joke about it and move on, which is pretty much what you have to do when you're seeing the same slide 50 times throughout the week. But according to those rules, if you participate in the room, if you are saying anything that will lead towards the development of any standards, you're required to agree, and by that, putting your name in and saying you were participating in that session as part of that. So going into the tool. Also, we're running pretty fast and loose in here, but some working groups will really enforce a speaking queue. And to get your name in the queue, you push the button in here. And the reason for that, I'm going completely off script here, but the reason that you put your name in the queue using this tool is so that remote participants are in the same queue. There's no favoritism towards the people who are locally and standing up at the microphone, making faces at the chair. It's whoever got in the queue first. All right, with that, hopefully everyone's had a chance to scan that. They have their device in their hand. You don't have to scan that. You can also go through the agenda tool, which I'll get to later here. If I point this here, will this, guess what?
Is it?
It's gone to sleep. I can reach over and hit the button as well if you want. Is there?
It's doing the same thing. Okay, we'll try this again.
Okay.
Hold on. Hold, please.
Woo. There you go. That's even bigger now. For those of you in the back.
All right.
Does it work? Yes. Fantastic. So we are still here again. Hi, I'm Bron. This is a slightly wordsmithed and nicer version of my profile in the data tracker. Just like Jay, I also run a company in my spare time. I'm the CEO at a company called Fastmail who do email services, and we have been very heavily involved in building internet standards as well. When I'm here, that means nothing. The fact that I'm CEO of Fastmail means absolutely nothing towards my development of standards. The fact that I do programming on some of the software that's developed here has a little bit more value. That gets me some respect from people that I know what I'm talking about. And I'm also a chair of 3 working groups. I have a little dot on my badge. We'll see some more about that later, saying that I'm a chair. You see people with a blue dot, that just means that they get to sit up the front and hopefully listen to other people. And so I'm involved in the email section specifically, but what I'm here to talk to you about today is how to use some of the tools that help you participate in the IETF and find where things are. All right, the note it well. This, as Jay said, are all the rules under which you're participating here. Mostly, you don't need to think about this. You do the standard things of being well behaved, respecting the people around you, and making sure that you disclose anything you know about intellectual property involved in the work you're doing. Doesn't mean that if you know of a patent on something, you can't talk about it. It does mean that if your company has a patent on something you're suggesting, you need to disclose it so that the IETF can decide whether to go ahead using that or not. All right, with that said, email. I'm from an email company, of course, they chose me to do this bit. This is from the most recent survey of IETF participants, but this has been pretty consistent for the entire time I've been involved in the IETF. People prefer to use email as their way of working on IETF standards, working on the process here. And there's some really good reasons for that, I think. And one of the most important is that your copy of the email stays around forever and you can look back and see exactly what was discussed. I have looked back at things that have happened in the IETF 20 years ago to see what was being discussed at the time. And because it's all in email, it's all still there. It hasn't disappeared into some website that went away 10 years ago. All right, there are also people prefer, next from that, on-site at an IETF meeting. You're all here on-site at an IETF meeting. You'll find the sessions very useful. You will also, I suspect, find the hallway very useful. The people you run into, the conversations you have at breakfast, the conversations you have between meetings, the conversations you have up in the rooftop bar late at night. That's where a lot of the work happens. The new work happens, new ideas happen, and you start to create the relationships with the people here that are going to be useful to you later. And that really, those relationships are so important because you'll be arguing over technical details and you have to trust that the other person involved in this argument is a sensible, real human being with motivations that hopefully you can understand and who is working towards the same goals, which, as Jay said on the slide there, is creating a better internet that interoperates and that things work. And so it's the relationships here, certainly JMAP, which is the thing that I came to the IETF for 8-ish years ago. My first meeting, there was a lot of, what even is this? Who are you? Do you know what you're doing? And it took a couple of meetings, and particularly some sitting in the bar, drinking and sharing war stories about stuff we'd seen gone wrong over the years, to build those relationships with other people at the IETF who had that social capital, who had that trust. And that's how you, I mean, that's not the only way you progress things, but that is a large part of how you progress things, is building that trust and finding people who other people already trust and getting them to trust you. And so a lot of it is built on trust. Then there's issue trackers, GitHub, remotely at an IETF meeting. Of pretty much anything I've ever been involved in, IETF supports remote better than almost anything else. Meet Echo tool actually makes remote people pretty much first-class citizens. You can participate in the work remotely. What you don't get is the hallway track, and you don't get the sitting around. You don't get the great coffee. Hackathons, that's happening right now. You might get to sneak out and see a little bit of that. Most of you are stuck in here all day, sorry. Instant messaging, no one seems to like very much. As you can see, it's in red. Don't even bother. No, check it out. The chat alongside this is sometimes useful. There'll be some side channel discussions going on in some working groups, so it's worth keeping an eye on the chat as well. All right, moving on. How am I doing for time?
Doing fine.
Awesome. I'm covering the important stuff here, people.
Nice and slow and easy.
All right. Did I? Yeah, no, there we go. There's a lot of mailing lists. It is not sensible to read all of this. If you don't know how to use filters and folders or some kind of mechanism to isolate your IETF mail from the rest of your email, you're going to enjoy a fire hose of emails. You don't have to read all of them. Just read the things that have value to you. I'm subscribed to 30 or 40 mailing lists, I think, out of that. Quite a few of them just go into folders that I almost never read, but if I'm searching for something in my email, it will find the related emails there. So very useful for that. IETF Announce, which is the top one there, I do definitely recommend. If you want to be involved in this organization, it's good to know what's going on. There's a little bit of volume there, but it's not. It says fairly high traffic. I wouldn't call that high traffic. I'm on high traffic mailing lists. If you're getting fewer than one message a day, you can glance at the subject, read it or not. Subscribe to that one. ID Announce, on the other hand, that's high traffic. I wouldn't put that in your inbox for sure. And likewise, the IETF general list and last call. I'm a moderator on the last call mailing list, so I have to look at it. But I just skim over to make sure people aren't misbehaving and then follow the couple of topics that I care about. Again, a lot of this stuff, it's good to go and look at the archives or to subscribe to it and file it away in a folder. It doesn't mean you have to read everything all the time. And then finally, the working group lists. That's where the work really happens. And for any working group you're involved in, particularly if you're working on a document or interested in a document, subscribe to the mailing list for sure, because that's where decisions will get made. Which it says right here. You can sign up for Mailman. The first time you sign up, you agree to the note. Well, you tick a little box saying, I'm going to do all the right things here. And from then you can send to any of the mailing lists. So you don't need to be subscribed to all of them, but you do need to subscribe to one. That means you've passed through the gate. You've agreed to be part of the IETF, to behave as an IETFer, and all is good. That last bit is highlighted because it really is, this really happens. People don't make final decisions here. We decide in a working group, this is what's important. This is the work we all agree is important. Now we're going to send it out to the mailing list to check consensus with the people who weren't here as well. And that's where the final decisions will be made. Someone will send a last call to the working group mailing list saying you have 2 weeks to object to this, or to say there needs to be further discussion on it. And that will happen, as you'll see in some of the later sessions, right through. The process of how an idea gets to an RFC is, it takes about 3 weeks, right? From start, 3 years, I think, is pretty much the average. It takes a long time, and there's lots of checks and balances. There's lots of reviews. We'd love it to be faster. Everyone tries to make it faster. It's a slow process, and that's fine, because we're building things that last a long time. RFCs last pretty much forever, or until they are working so out of step with the rest of the world that people decide to go back and revise them to update them to what's actually needed. So a lot of RFCs will be replaced, but they last 10, 20 years, a lot of these documents, and that's a long time in the internet. So it takes a while to develop, but this is the things that will build the foundations. This is really low-level architecture, so it's worth taking the time to get it right. All right, some tools. The Mail Archive has a list of all the emails. There's tons of different ways to filter it. I'm not going to teach you how to use a website. You can look at these slides later. You can try it out. Do try it out. Mostly things don't break when you poke around on them, particularly something like an archive. So feel free to play with it and check it and see how it all works. look for things in there, find a topic you're interested in, and look back at the history of the discussions that have happened over the years on that topic. So search for a keyword word or a technology and see what people have done. All right. I'm just, by the way, if you have questions at any time, feel free to jump in. You don't have to wait to the end. I'm not seeing a ton of people in the queue, so I'm just rolling on, but feel free to pop up and ask questions as they occur to you. All right. This slide tells you how to actually get things out of mailing lists. This is pretty basic instructions for any email communication anywhere. Right? Nobody's obliged to read. I didn't write these slides, but I totally agree with them. Nobody's obliged to read your emails, and they won't necessarily read your emails. They might reply to them. It doesn't mean they've actually read them. They might have picked out a keyword and been incensed enough to write a complaint about what they think you said. So making it as clear as possible so that doesn't happen too much is absolutely worthwhile. Structuring it, sticking to as much as possible one topic at a time as well. Once emails start expanding into tons of topics, people will reply to one of them and you'll lose things in the conversation. A lot of people only read the subject, so make sure your subject makes sense and that you reply to messages so that they thread with people who have good email systems. And then replying below quoted text, this is a whole topic. You don't have to do it. None of this is what you have to do, right? Communication works by getting an idea from your head into the heads of the people reading it, and whatever achieves that works, and it's good. But particularly if you're applying to more than one point, quoting each point, trimming it back to what's necessary to describe that point in the quote, and then putting your response afterwards is more likely to get your ideas into the heads of the other people. And that's what you're trying to achieve. So it's all, as the word says, effective. What works? This is the kind of thing that works. And the final point about being aware of rich text formatting, in the archive, it won't show us rich text. Some people don't see rich text either because they've configured their mail systems not to. Simple text is going to get through to more people. So the simpler you make it, the more plain text you make it, you're describing your ideas, you're not drawing a masterpiece. So short, simple, easy to read wins. Cool. It's happening again. I spent too long on a slide. I'm sorry. All right, the data tracker. Yeah, let's go straight past this. Data tracker is the tool that you use to interact with IETF systems most of the time. As somebody working on IETF documents, all the documents are in there, information about all the people's there. I'm just going to read off the slide because, oh, it's right in front of me too. Yeah, you can navigate through that. And again, as with the mailing list archive, poke around in there, have a look, find things. You don't need to understand the whole thing. It's a big complex tool. It has lots of parts. It has evolved over time. It's developed for the needs of the 700 something people who are here, the 50,000 people who are subscribed to mailing lists. There's a lot of people interacting with this tool in a lot of different ways. So don't worry about the parts that you're not using. Find the bits that are useful to you and play with them and figure out how they work. All the history of all the documents are there. Every time anyone publishes a draft, and I'm getting ahead into other people's areas, so I won't spend ages on this, but any time that you upload a draft and give it to the IETF and give an irrevocable license, which means you can't tell us to take it away again later, that document goes into a history that's there forever, for however long forever goes. A copy of it gets sent to a mailing list, so that means it's sitting around for a long time. And you can also go back and you can look at the history. There are tools in the data tracker to show what changed. You can see a side-by-side difference of exactly what's been changed in every version of a draft. So generally, ideas will be discussed. The authors will make their updates to the draft, and that will be published. And that gives the history of exactly all the thoughts that led to the final document that becomes an RFC. All the information about the meetings. You've hopefully all had a look at the agenda tool. You've hopefully interacted with the data tracker when you scanned that QR code earlier and logged in so that you were present at this meeting. And there's tons more there. Have a look around, find it. All right, it's still not working. It's all right. I have you here to help me. We're good. right. Look at this. We're absolutely smashing through this thing. Just a quick show of hands while we're waiting for this to work. Who has had a look around the data tracker already? All right. And then who hasn't had a look yet? Good on you. Thank you for being honest. It's fine. And who's asleep? Yeah, Barry, of course you are. So you should have hit the coffee queue earlier. I tried the beetroot coffee. Oh yeah, little piece of advice for people, and Graham saw this morning. Don't put too much of the oil chili on your dumplings because it spills all the way down your legs. I've asked the photographer to take photos from the waist up only because that's going to be fun cleaning this up. Are we good? Awesome. Next slide, please. Yes. All right. So this is what you see when you first go to the data tracker. You can go in to search. It looks just nice, like a little Google box. You type in a single keyword. It's then going to pop up a giant menu of options to allow you to drill down more on this. But you can search for all sorts of stuff here, and you can see there's a little menu along the top as well. The other thing is that data tracker is your identity provider for most things for the IETF, other than mailing lists now, but the plan sometime 2025. Yeah, ideally, eventually you log in once and then all IETF things become available to you, which is good because you tick the little button saying I'm following the note well, and then it's all good. IETF meetings, we're here. Questions at this stage, by the way, just before we roll on? No, I'm doing a perfect job. Appreciate it. All right. So they call these plenary meetings, and there's a session called a plenary session as well. It just means everyone together. We meet 3 times a year. We're currently meeting in Asia. We do Europe. We do North America, roughly on a cycle of 1 per year. Sometimes it gets mixed around a little bit, but the idea is to share the travel load for people around the world and to share the time zone pain. I have attended a couple of these remotely, particularly during the times when traveling wasn't allowed and everyone was attending remotely, and they were going from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. and things like that. It's pretty rough when you're not in the time zone. It's pretty rough to fly halfway around the world. I'm from Australia. I know all about that. So I try and share the load, which is why it's in different locations. And also you get to check out some fun cities. There's a lot happening this week. 130 working groups meeting. There's 9, I think, is it 9 parallel channels? So there'll always be more than one thing happening at a time. Birds of a feather sessions fit in the same type of thing. That's part of the way that new work happens. If someone has an idea for some new work that doesn't fit into an existing working group, often they'll hold a birds of feather session, which is a chance for people to come together and see if there's enough interest in the idea for it to be likely to progress. Not every idea becomes an RFC. Plenty of drafts die partway along the process. There might only be an individual idea that never gets anywhere. They might make it to a working group and then the working group decides not to progress. Not everything becomes an RFC, but birds of feather session is to try and see whether there's enough interest, enough diverse interest. It's not just one company trying to push their idea, which likely won't make it further when people review this and say, is this likely to get widespread adoption or not? So that's a chance to test the idea before it goes to a full working group. IETF research groups, hopefully someone else will speak about that. I've done very little with that. The plenary session, which I think it is worth attending. Some people say it's pretty boring. Hopefully it's pretty boring because otherwise you get fireworks and that's not fun when people start getting unhappy at each other in public. But I complained about something in the last one, so it happens. The hackathon, which happens on the weekend beforehand, people are out there running code. Running code is really important. IETF believes in rough consensus and running code. Rough consensus means people either agree on it or they've been heard and their ideas have been discussed and decided that wasn't the path to go by not even a majority. There's a whole RFC on it. It's really interesting. Go read it. That's my advice to most things, right? Go read about it or talk to people about it in the bar, not here or here. But yeah, where was I? Let's move on. Social events. We're playing board games on Tuesday night. And then the hot RFC session tonight, which somehow I've wound up chairing, moderating something. You're welcome. Side meetings and the network. Oh yeah, the hackathon. I was talking about the hackathon. I need another coffee. The running code's really important because if your idea is brilliant and nobody implements it, then it hasn't really improved the internet for anyone, has it? So it's got to be implementable. And the hackathon is a great place to test your idea with other people and make sure it works. So you're stuck in here this time, but next IETF, I do recommend showing up to the hackathon. Even if you're not a programmer, you can work with people who are writing a program, help them test things, help them document what has and hasn't worked. It's a great place to be.
And at a later session, we'll have the hackathon chairs joining to introduce the hackathon to you. So it should be fun.
I'm trying to tell you everything now so you can nip off to the bar. I'm sorry. All right, let's move on. Standard session looks pretty much like this. You'll have someone sitting there running the show. That'll be the person with the blue dot in their badge. You have someone standing up at the microphone presenting slides, and then people will stand up at the microphone and tell them why their idea is really bad, or maybe why they should just change a little bit, and then it'll be great once they implement the idea of the person at the microphone. That's how it works. But do stand up at the microphone and ask questions about things too, because often a working group may not have thought of something that you know. Obviously, calibrate it, but do get involved. Even at your first IETF, you can have good ideas too. It's true. All right, screens, there'll be one screen. At the moment, this is kind of the same thing showing on both of them, but often there'll be one screen that has the QR code and gets replaced by the remote speaker when someone remote joins. And then there'll be the queue, which you can't see at the moment because nobody's in it, but it will show you who's waiting to speak up on the screen as well. And all the other details that you can see around you. There's generally power, there's generally seats. If there aren't seats, that means the session's really popular, and next IETF it'll ask for a bigger room. That's really good when that happens. And there's a clicker that doesn't work.
Oh my goodness.
Hats are optional. Yeah, Barry's wearing a hat. I left mine back up in my room. But also, you can say which company you're representing. You don't need to. It's useful if you're trying to explain how your company is going to implement this thing and you've spoken to people at other companies that are also going to implement it. So maybe it's something that has legs. It's not useful if you're trying to say, I'm from the company that knows stuff and so I'm right. People don't care where you work for whether you're right or not. They care whether your idea is sound and will be implementable and can have some running code and will work with the rest of the IETF's things. The internet's a complex place, and we need to make sure that adding a new thing won't break what's already there. So security considerations are very important for any internet work. Anything that happens at the IETF will have a security considerations section because security is important for everything we build. And likewise, people will check that it will interoperate, that it won't break existing things. So no matter how good your idea is, if it's going to break the rest of the internet, it won't be accepted. And then all the rest is behave yourself, test your technology works in advance, important details, smile at the photographer, and yeah, enjoy. And prepare by reading all the documents and watching past sessions, which approximately nobody does. So don't feel bad if you haven't. One of the main questions is, have you read the draft? When someone comes up with an idea that's already been discussed and dismissed, and the answer is almost always no. People haven't read the draft. One of the most important bits of being here in person and building relationships is finding suckers who will read your draft and review it so that people will believe it's been reviewed and hence progress it. It's for real. One of the most important things is building a community of people who will review your work and who you can review work for so that it gets the reviews it needs. All right. Yes. White lanyard means photographers allowed to take photos of just the top half of me, thanks. We've already talked about this. Yeah, and use the AI to make me look taller. Thank you. Red lanyard means I don't want to be photographed individually and try and avoid me in group photographs as well. You're very welcome to wear one. There's no judgment one way or another about your choice with that. There's little things you can put on the bottom. New participants, stick it there. Everyone will then know to treat you like a learner driver and give you plenty of space. And am I allowed to say that? Yeah, no. People will be helpful, and we'll show you around. And lots of other things. I had 1 year, I think 7 or 8 things on the bottom of my badge because I felt silly. So feel free to stick pretty much anything on there, so long as people can still read your name. Don't spill coffee on it. I'm doing great. All right. But yeah, most important thing is if you're looking for some of those key people that Jay pointed out in the earlier slides, the little dots on their badge will tell you that they are one of those people. Don't people's bellies, you can ask them as well. Cool. We employ a professional photographer. There's a whole slide. Unprofessional photographers are allowed to take photos too. It doesn't have a monopoly on this thing. All right. Meeting technology. Data tracker. Again, it's a website. It has lots of things. Many of them, not necessarily in blue, will react to you clicking on them, which is usability is amazing. You just move your mouse around and some bits will respond to you. But you can do all sorts of stuff with the agenda tool. There's a lot of capabilities in there I don't use. Pretty much I use Control F and I search for the name of the thing I want, and then I jump to that, and then I click the little buttons next to it. There are a ton of little buttons here that will point you to the different parts of the tooling for that particular session. So there's one that will show you all the materials related to the session you're in. One will take you to a little online collaborative editor where you can put your own notes in the minutes. And as my mother taught me many years ago, whoever takes the notes of a session decides what happened there. So do volunteer to take the minutes, because then you have more influence over what was actually decided in the meeting. She got involved in local politics. It's the whole story. All right. There's tools there to see both the full Meet Echo, which gives you the interface with the slides on it and the full chat and everything, and to use the little tool that you've all seen on your phone already, right? You can nod. Yeah, of course you have. Everyone scanned the QR code or went into the agenda tool and clicked the link there. And so you're all present in this meeting. We'll do a head count later. And other than that, it'll tell you what else is happening at the time, so you know how much you're missing out on, which is heaps. And that's okay. The good thing is there are different areas, and generally you have a particular area you're most interested in. I'm in art applications real time. All my working groups are there. Most of the stuff I'm interested in is there. I go to a little bit from security area as well. Go to a little bit from the web areas, because some of the technologies I use are related to web. You'll probably likewise have 1 or 2 areas that are your key area of interest, and you'll be spending most of your time at sessions for that. But do be a tourist. Go check out other areas as well. See what they're working on. See how they run their sessions, because different sessions run in very different ways, and getting an understanding of how different parts of the IETF work is great. And feel free to volunteer and step up to here or there, or maybe Jay's kind of a singleton, but there's other roles where there's a possibility to step in and take it on at some point in the future. So do get involved in the running of the IETF too. It's hopefully a company will sponsor you to do it, because otherwise it's going to take a lot of your time. And it's not, the IETF doesn't pay people to do stuff like this. I'm not even being given a coffee for this. I had to bring my own water. It's ridiculous. That's someone else's coffee and it's empty. All right. Meeting network. There's 700 something people here. The network runs right through the hotel. This team does an amazing job providing really high quality networking to all of us. since a few years ago, they even get the location right. The IP range gets its location updated before it comes here. It used to be that as soon as you logged onto the IETF network, it thought you were in the previous location where the IETF used to be, and maps would get very confused, and geolocation would get very confused, and prices, and when you search for your flight home, would appear in the wrong. It was crazy. But now that's really good too. But the Wi-Fi network here is amazing. Try the IPv6. It didn't work for me at the hackathon, but maybe they've got it going now. IPv6 is the future. It's coming any day. Or just hop on the regular IETF network or the IETF hotel network. They all work really, really well, and it's amazing. I mean, it's not amazing. We're at the conference where the internet's developed and the internet works, but it's also amazing because the clicker doesn't even work. All right, Zulip, the chat system. I don't like it. Sorry. You can see why I was the bottom one on the list. But the side channel chat will be happening there. You can try Zulip. It's okay. We don't all have to have the same likes and dislikes. I like email. So I work for an email company. There's also a wiki. It has a bunch of details about this meeting. Hopefully you've already seen some of it. It's worth, if you're trying to coordinate with anyone, find things that are happening around the meeting. Very useful. Also for the hackathon, there's a whole section in there, which I'm sure you'll hear about later. And a map of Bangkok, which tells you where we are. Yes, I haven't even looked at that. Click on the links, experiment, look around. You can even edit the page, but be reasonable about it. Come on, don't leave me stuck on this page. All right. There's another session for how to use MeetEcho. The important thing is each time you go into a session, do log into MeetEcho. The people running the session will appreciate it because it gives them the number of people who are there so that they can get a bigger room next time. If you get 100 people in the room and 10 of them sign into MeetEcho, it's going to look weird when you ask for a big session next time. So do log in. And also, I think you're not required to log in if you don't speak, but it's better to be logged in, and then people know you were there, and you know you were there. All right. Are we?
Yeah.
Awesome. Questions, please.
And we did go over a little time because we started just a bit late. So if we're not seeing any questions.
Barry. Barry was my mentor when I started IETF.
I just want to do a quick thing. How many of you came here primarily for one particular working group to participate in? Only a couple of you, a few of you. So my first meeting, which is now almost 30 years ago, I came for one working group. I had no idea what the other working groups were doing, and I was completely unprepared, and it was like a fire hose. I filled up my week. I went into all these working group sessions, and I had no idea what they were in the middle of working on. And they would say, let's look at issue 57, and I completely no context. So be prepared for that. You'll go to some things where you don't really know what's going on. My second meeting, I had prepared, and I read drafts, and I looked at the mailing lists, and I knew what I was getting into. And here I am almost 30 years later, still doing this stuff.
All right. Now I have someone in the queue. Chai, are you remote here?
You can take the queue person first. I had not queued properly.
Yeah.
Possibly remote.
Please turn on your microphone and speak. Or not. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a question about the consensus process, and in terms of who, how, drafts become adopted, and then drafts become RFCs. I'm also a participant in the CA browser forum, and there's very strict rules about who can even talk, let alone who can vote on how to move an idea forward.
Yeah.
And so I know IETF is much more loose, which I think is good, but I'm kind of curious as to how you resolve conflict.
There's a whole session on that. My personal opinion of how conflict resolves is three ways. You got persuasion, you got exhaustion, and you got fiat, where someone just declares. you don't ever want to get to fiat, where people just declare consensus because you couldn't get agreement. Sadly, often it gets there by exhaustion. People just get sick of arguing their point. That's fact. Ideally, you persuade people. So it reaches consensus when everyone either says, yeah, I accept, I'm in the rough, as it's called, because it's rough consensus. And in the rough means generally people think your idea is not right, that you're either wrong or right, but it doesn't matter and it's not worth it. Like that, you can really have things where people say, yeah, I mean, technically you're right, but it'll work fine without that, and it makes it too complex, that kind of thing. So generally you get to consensus when everyone's been heard and realizes they're not going to advance any further, or everyone else says, no, you're wrong.
Okay, interesting. Also, I was curious, when people speak at the IETF, are they representing the organizations that hire them?
Officially, no. I mean, obviously, people are going to represent the person who pays their salary. To some degree or another, it is hard to just walk in here completely absent of anything outside, but as much as possible, you're stepping in here, bringing your knowledge and experience, and not.
But I guess I mean, like,
biases.
the opinions stated by the people are their own, and we are interacting with them as individuals and not representatives of their respective companies.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's the theory.
Please repeat this on the microphone. You often see people from the same company disagreeing.
And it was added that we often see people from the same company disagreeing.
There's 5 people from my company here. I'm sure we'll have some disagreements this week. That's true.
Well, thank you, Braun. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Yes. We're going to take 5 minutes to switch over to the next speaker. So our next session is session 3, standards development. A lot of fantastic information that you all need to know. So yeah, we'll get started in just 5 minutes. Thank you.
Also, if you get seats close to the door, you can get in the coffee queue first. Pro tip.
I haven't seen you yet.